going to introduce our climate emergency. Take it away. We have a bunch of speakers, and at the end, we'll be talking about how chapters can all get more involved in trying to avert the disaster we're all facing. Thanks.
Can't see you.
Okay, everyone should be able to see.
Tell them your, yeah.
Can you see the screen?
Tell them to look at the Richard Rollins screen, not me.
Yeah, they have to choose what screen they're looking at.
So
choose the Richard Rollins screen.
You should be looking at the screen that says climate crisis.
You want to see that?
And Richard Rollins is the name, the Zoom name on it.
Are you all seeing that?
We see it in San Diego.
Okay, so if anybody wonders what's happening, that means you're not on the right screen, and just look for Richard Rollins and a PowerPoint presentation. Okay.
You'll tell them to pin it, otherwise your voice will make them flip back to my screen.
So I believe the proper instructions here for everyone would be to pin my video presentation to your screen. That way you'll see it, and voices will not move the screen to a different presenter. So I'll start, assuming everyone's on board. I just want to say thanks to the steering committee for asking us to speak again how the Sierra Club chapters can help local governments recognize the threat of climate change and take action to address it. You may recall that in February we spoke about the latest science behind our climate crisis and the growing body of evidence that the impact of climate change is greater than we expected, and it's happening more quickly than expected. And I can assure you we are not going to go over that science again today. Instead, we want to focus on how to find solutions and how to get those solutions adopted and implemented locally. This is a slide that you may recall from that February meeting, and I just want to go over it very briefly. If you look at the top of the slide, there's a light green line, kind of a squiggly line. That's the Air Resource Board projection of business as usual. And the dotted line going from the circles from 2020 down to 2030 down to 2050 are old mandates which no longer are supported by current science. And unfortunately for all of us, most of our climate plans are tied to those old mandates. And that blue-green arrow that you see descending from the 2030 mark represents Governor Brown's executive order, where we should be at net zero by 2045, and after that, actually remove carbon from the atmosphere. And the red arrow labeled climate emergency represents a reflection of some interpretation of the current science. So the solutions that are needed must help us depart from that squiggly line at the top and change our trajectory over the next decade to fall somewhere between the blue-green arrow and the red arrow. So that's what we're going to talk about for the next hour and a half, is how can that be accomplished, beginning with local actions. So there are 4 speakers today. I'm speaking right now. Andy Schrader is going to speak next. He is participating by Zoom. Following Andy will be Rachel Golden. Then Rebecca Franke and I here in Oakland will talk about our update to our toolbox of local actions that have been implemented around California. And lastly, I'll talk a little bit about what's happening up in the Bay Area here, followed by questions and answers. So with that, it's time to introduce Andy Schrader. Andy is the Director of Environmental Affairs, Water Policy, and Sustainability for Councilmember Paul Koretz in Los Angeles. you can read his bio here. I do not want to try to read that to you over the Zoom presentation, but I do want to call your attention to a couple of things. One, at the very bottom, is the fact that he has won an award for his work with banning plastic bags in Los Angeles and other Southern California cities. And also about midway through the list there is his assistance in retiring the Superior, Ames, and Harbor coastal natural gas power plants. So we are very happy that Andy can join us, and he's going to talk a little bit about the local response in Los Angeles to climate emergency. So Andy, if you take over the audio, I will switch to your PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Not too well yet.
You can speak a little louder.
Okay, Richard and I have practiced this for hours, so you'll see that this will be the tightest presentation ever. Thanks everybody for taking up part of your Sunday afternoon to talk about the climate emergency with all the ways we have to distract ourselves from it. I appreciate your focus. I work with Los Angeles City Council member Paul Koretz, who's also been a long-term member of the Sierra Club, as his Director of Environmental Affairs, Water Policy, and Sustainability. And I live in one of the Santa Monica mountain areas. So on November 9th of last year, like so many of us in this vicinity, I packed up my 2 kids and evacuated our home, not knowing if we would see it again. And we had to evacuate for the second time in 2 years. We also had to evacuate from the smoke from the creek fire. And we were some of the lucky ones who got a home to return home to. So while I've been working on it for years, climate disruption is something that's become really personal to me. So I just want to add a couple quick thoughts to, next slide, please. I want to add a couple quick thoughts to the information Richard provided. According to the Yale Climate Connections, the difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees of warming is enormous in terms of survivability. It's the difference between moderate to very high risk of heat wave deaths, agricultural devastation and collapse, and even worse, extreme weather damages than we've been seeing, if that can be imagined. Next slide. The IPCC chair said that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is not impossible, but it will require unprecedented transitions in all aspects of society. So in essence, we have to change all the ways that we create energy, govern industries, construct buildings, cities, transit systems, and use land for agriculture and resource extraction. The IPCC report even says that the changes that would have to occur have no documented historic precedent. However, next slide. That's not really accurate. During World War II, the country was able to mobilize really on the spur of the moment within a year to fight the Axis threat. We stopped making cars, started making tanks, jeeps, planes. We built a secret city in Oak Ridge and invented the atom bomb. And we turned everything around, got everybody on the same page, and got it done. Next slide. And JFK said, let's put a man on the moon in 10 years, and we got it done in like 7. Next slide. So how do we do it? What we're finding from the city of Los Angeles is the world is starving for leadership on all these solutions. And I'm not saying that we've necessarily discovered the way, but these are the solutions that we're pursuing. And just to set any expectations, I will not be covering the mayor's sustainability plan in any meaningful way. The climate emergency mobilization has been led by Los Angeles City Council member Paul Koretz, and that's the effort that I'm working on and the one that I will be covering today. So in the last few years, Councilmember Koretz and I have been working with this group that you're looking at including the Climate Mobilization Organization and Naomi Klein's LEAP organization. And then this group, which is called, next slide, the LEAP LA Coalition, that formed around a shared vision, emergency climate action centered on environmental justice. And that's essential to any climate emergency declaration effort. What happened in World War II is big industry took over, and the frontline people ended up in worse shape than they were already in. So what this means is that as we make a rapid transition to green energy, we simultaneously make a just transition, so we clean up and positively impact the communities most affected by historic pollution and help out any affected fossil fuel workers who until about 20 years ago were actually heroes. And we make sure that they're not left behind through justice. Next slide. So in last year in 2018, Councilmember Koretz was joined by Councilmember Bob Blumenfield in authoring legislation to create the world's first climate emergency mobilization department, which I'll call CEMD going forward. We were able to get money allocated to it during the city budget cycle, and the city council approved it in concept last year. Next slide. And then what happened after that is really kind of insanely remarkable. The city of Berkeley found the news about our CEMD and declared a climate emergency. And then as an acknowledgement, they invited Councilmember Koretz up to speak at their climate town hall. Next slide. Their declaration was followed by Richmond, Santa Cruz, Oakland, then London, England, and then the whole effort exploded to today over 985 climate emergency declarations covering 212 million people, including a few weeks ago, next slide, the entire country of Argentina. And I don't want to take full credit for this, but all I'm saying is before LA went, there were 3 municipalities, and after us, 989 and counting. Next slide. Okay, so meanwhile back in LA, we got the Climate Emergency Mobilization Department approved on July 3rd of this year, fully approved, and it will be overseen by a Climate Emergency Commission, basically to ensure that the CEMD director stays on track, on mission, and especially on the short timeline that we have. And then in order to properly engage and give voice to the environmental justice communities, we're going to hold community assemblies across the city in the 5 Calaveras screen worst polluted communities of the city, both to educate the public on what's going on, what's coming, and to include their voices as we vet our draft climate emergency mobilization implementation plan, and then to make sure that what is in there doesn't adversely affect them. So the City Council Budget Committee, including my boss, just allocated $1 million as seed funding for this effort, and underline that we have $15 million more available in the unallocated balance for a continuing funding source as policies are developed and begin being implemented. And that's one of the biggest things that any city can do is spend the money. Next slide. Mayor Garcetti is on board and included his efforts as part of the latest version of his Sustainable City Plan, which he's calling LA's Green New Deal. His document is pretty remarkable in and of itself, but I'll let you dig through that on your own. I do want to acknowledge the Jobs Cabinet, which will be essential to ensuring a just transition for workers, and which is essential to all these efforts, particularly as we know the building trades have been trying to fight us. So it's really important that we really focus on the jobs aspect of this. Next slide. I also want to point you in the direction of the also really remarkable LA County Sustainability Plan, which the entire board of the county supervisors approved as a whole a few weeks ago. And it's actually pretty radical. So check it out when you have a chance. I'm not sure the supervisors all knew exactly what was in there, but it's really amazing. Next slide. So you might be asking yourselves, what's the difference between these plans and the climate emergency mobilization effort? The climate emergency mobilization effort is intended to be that, a mobilization across all sectors, across the whole city, across the region, hopefully spreading across the whole country and across the planet. We know the federal government's not going to do anything. Even if we had a friendly president, we might not get anything done. And we just can't keep making plans and setting goals. We need a strong, immediate, effective implementation, and we need to engage literally everyone in the effort, or we're not going to make it. So toward that end, we've already completed some pilot projects that I want to share with you today, and are looking at others as we move toward mobilization mode. In terms of the CEMD, we're going to do the community assemblies before we actually have policies to roll out. But these are the things we've been working on that are the most relevant to what we're talking about today. Next slide. So the Cool Cities Challenge is a $10 million gauntlet that's been thrown down to create what are called cool blocks across the cities. Next slide. A cool block is a traditional neighborhood of homes facing each other on a block. One neighbor invites the others over to work together for 4 months on energy efficiency efforts, water conservation, waste reduction, and emergency preparedness. And once you throw in emergency preparedness, suddenly the conservative folks on the block are also interested. And who doesn't want to save money on their bills? So as I alluded to, there's also a financial incentive to the program. The first city to transform 25% of its neighborhoods into cool blocks will win the 10 million bucks. And that 25%, if you've heard of the 100th monkey theory, that 25% seems to be the magic number to get the whole city to engage. So 3 of the most influential cities in California, Palo Alto, San Francisco, and LA, successfully piloted this program on 50 blocks, and we achieved an average household carbon reduction of 32% and created disaster resilient neighborhoods so far as a result. And then in LA's most successful neighborhood, and this was a street bordering Brentwood and Santa Monica, they completed their cool block last year, literally the week before the July 6th heat storm. And one sec. The electricity went out for half of the street, and they had already mapped out who were the sensitive receptors, who were the elderly folks who might need some extra help, who were the ones who had extra large refrigerators and extra beds. And they immediately kicked into action, moved the elderly folks into air-conditioned homes, moved the food into refrigerators, and ended up having a great time doing it. And the best part is the woman who had lived at the bottom of the street for 40 years finally met the woman who lived at the top of the street for 40 years. So they reduced their greenhouse gas emissions, reduced their waste, water, got emergency prepared, and created a strong community along the way. And they're still, a year later, having regular parties together. There's nothing better than that. Next slide. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this one because we're still looking into it. But suffice it to say, this is the business district version of a cool block. And this is the way that you can organize the small businesses in different districts across the city. And they have the right type of thinking as they lead with 3 imperatives: equity, resilience, and climate protection. So check it out. Next slide. Next is an effort we're piloting with an organization called Pando Populous, entitled City Blitz. Basically, it's a governmental peer-to-peer program for sharing best practices in sustainability and resilience. At the first City Blitz, for instance, the city of Claremont tutored the city of Carson and others on best practices. And Carson is starting to create its own sustainability plan. And we're planning on doing more in the future. The C40 mega cities who are working on climate together basically operates the same way. And so we think that City Blitz is the way that smaller cities can work together and reduce their climate emissions at the same time. Next slide. One of the best practices we launched within the LA city government is to install a chief sustainability officer and a chief resilience officer in each and every city department, so that each department works every single day with a clear eye on the mayor and the city council's goals. I know that every city's organizational structure is different and not as large as ours, but the concept is sound and it's really being quite effective. Within that structure, we helped the mayor launch a water cabinet, and from that sprung a tree cabinet, and representatives of the city departments meet once a month about water conservation, tree health, canopy health, to share best practices and to make sure that they're not duplicating efforts. We're expecting the jobs cabinet and an energy cabinet to follow suit. Next slide. And within the LA Food Policy Council, we launched an effort back in 2011, and this is under the banner of how do we spend the city's funds in the most valuable way. We launched an effort in 2011 to require city departments who purchase food to follow several steps of sustainability under the Good Food Purchasing Program, including environmental practices, a valued workforce, humane treatment of animals, and a reduction of GMOs and pesticide use. Next slide. The LA Food Policy Council and Councilmember Koretz ended up winning a Future Policy 2018 award from the United Nations for this effort. And it's been spreading all across the country. Basically, this is a great way for the cities to use their purchasing power to really transform the food system, and it's working. Next slide. The city also has in place an environmentally preferable purchasing policy for all city purchasing, and we're in the process, as of Tuesday, of adopting the state of California's Buy Clean procurement policy, which the Sierra Club helped push us into, and gladly so. And this establishes a maximum acceptable global warming potential for each category of eligible materials, including structural steel, carbon steel rebar, flat glass, and mineral wood insulation. And we're working to make sure every dollar possible that the city spends is in line with its goals and its values. Next slide. I think most of the cities across the country are all in the same boat in terms of how bad our recycling situation has become, and that boat is sinking. China's national sword policy has effectively halted our ability to send recycling there, and thereby interrupted an enormous market for our recyclables. But this is actually an opportunity. It gives us a chance to finally get it right locally. If we were to design the worst possible system, it was the old system where we cut down our own country's trees, drill up our own oil and gas, mine its ore, and then send those raw materials off to China for it to become materials that they can use. So now we're working on what we're calling the Green Sword program, where under the current climate emergency mobilization implementation plan, we have to develop and manufacture a large number of solar panels, a large number of heat pumps. And so we want to prioritize in our waste stream the raw materials that can be upcycled into raw materials to create those items. We want to do it here in Los Angeles and LA County and create the circular economy that we've all been talking about, and along the way create all the jobs that we need. And a lot of those can be low-skill jobs that some of our homeless folks can take on. Next slide. Now, lastly, for today anyway, LA is looking at forward-thinking ways to manage its food and organics waste. We just moved forward this past Tuesday our big organics program. Given the proximity of all the Central Valley farming, there's a huge opportunity to create a world-class organics composting project that makes use of all of our food waste and our plant waste that, as you guys know, creates methane, one of the worst greenhouse gas emissions. It helps create healthy topsoil that actually sequesters carbon dioxide while providing nutrients to allow farmers to stop using so much fertilizer and pesticides. So we'll create a healthy cycle instead of the downward spiral that we're currently in. I'm happy to say that Councilmember Koretz's organics motion is being taken very seriously by our Bureau of Sanitation and the Mayor's office. And we already have a pilot project going where they're taking our pilot households' food waste to a facility in the Central Valley, turning it into compost, and the nearby farmers are using it on their crops. And that's the goal of all of this, is really to think systemically and holistically and replace all our bad habits with good ones and do it on a massive scale and do it really fast. Next slide. So the climate emergency mobilization group I've been working with for the past 3 years also has their own suggestions about next steps that you guys can look at. I included on the slide, which Richard is going to send out. You guys can check into it yourself. Next slide. So, you know, as we noticed from the climate emergency declarations, what happens in LA doesn't stay in LA, it spreads. And we realize that all these cities who have declared climate emergencies are really looking at, okay, now what do we do? How do we create this implementation plan? How do we move this entire effort forward at the speed and scale we need to if we're going to survive? So one of the things that I've got my interns working on with me is to contact all the local elected officials who have moved forward these climate emergency declarations and see if they will work in concert with us in moving forward aggressive legislation on building electrification, on waste reduction, organics, the stuff we were talking about, some transportation issues, which hopefully you'll be hearing about soon, and ways of doing away with all the fossil fuel infrastructure. Next slide. And this is why I do what I do. These are the 2 kids that I had to evacuate during the fires. And if I can get them to 2100 on a planet that somewhat resembles the one we're on right now, then I've done my job. And that's what I get up every day and I look in their eyes. So here's how you reach me. I'm happy to answer any questions. And thanks for being here, you guys.
Andy, thanks so much. Really great to hear in Los Angeles. I just want to confirm that you can stay on for the next hour. We'll go through Rachel Golden's presentation, who I believe is online right now, and I'm going to stop sharing. Karen, if you can give the screen to Rachel. She can move right ahead. While you're doing that, I can tell you a little bit about Rachel. Rachel is a senior campaign representative working for Sierra Club out of the Oakland office here. She joined the club in 2016 to launch the club's first building electrification campaign in California, and we're going to hear about that today. Rachel has a master's degree in resources and a master in public policy from UC Berkeley. She lives in Oakland. She's getting rid of her gas appliances one at a time. And with that, Rachel, if you're ready, I'll turn this over to you.
Fantastic. I'm ready. I'm here. I'm just trying to put my slides in slide mode. Perfect. Can you see a big slide of me and my son next to a heat pump?
Yes, it looks great.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. And Andy, I must say that was a really powerful presentation, and I'm very inspired by all the work that LA is doing, and also everyone in this meeting across California is doing some really powerful work on climate and the environment. So it's really an honor to be here with you all. And sorry I can't be in one of the headquarters in person. So today I want to chat about building electrification and why I think it's one of the next big climate fights in California, and especially how I'd love to work with all of you on this growing campaign across the state. So first, I'd like to just cover, why we need to get off gas and electrify our homes and buildings, and give some snapshots. So a snapshot of the technology options to electrify, some of the benefits of building electrification, and a snapshot of the campaign, so our goals and where we work. And then close out today with some discussion on the collaboration with chapters, especially the SF Bay chapter and other chapters that we're working with across the state. So to start off with, why is building electrification a priority of the club? We got a lot of campaigns to work on. So most people don't think about buildings as a major source of climate pollution, but it is, and it's an area that's not being sufficiently addressed by our policymakers, so we need to make a change. Homes and buildings in California consume more gas than all of California's power plants and produce more GHG emissions than all of our power plants. And yet we have nothing like SB 100 or an RPS or other policies that's going to achieve the gas reduction in buildings that we need to align with climate science. So if we look at the pie chart of greenhouse gas emissions in California, you can see majority comes from transportation, and then over a quarter comes from buildings. And then when you break out that slice of buildings, over 2/3 comes from our gas appliances, and then 1/3 comes from power plants. And obviously that wedge is going to continue to shrink as we implement SB 100. And it's clear that we cannot achieve our climate goals if we just do more renewables on the grid and energy efficiency. We need to get rid of gas. That's fundamental to achieving our climate goals. So that's why we have launched this campaign. The technology is also available today to electrify. So this campaign is not based upon a future technology that's not developed yet. You can go out and buy all of this advanced electric technology today, and the technology is only getting better with time. New products are coming out that are plug and play, that are going to require less electrical upgrades, that are smaller, will fit into smaller homes. So the technology is just getting better, but today it's already extremely advanced. So this pie chart shows how we all use our gas. So all the gas coming through our gas meters, over 80% of that gas is going to heat water, for showers, washing dishes, and heat your homes. Obviously, this is an average, so it's going to change a little bit across the state, depending on if you're a colder or warmer climate zone. This is pretty much what it looks like in California. And then less than 15% comes from other uses, like cooking, clothes drying, if you have a fireplace. That's the rest of the gas use. So you can see that advanced heat pumps can replace your gas furnace and your gas water heater. You'll save 3 to 5 times on energy, and you will reduce emissions today. So we did analysis of all climate zones and of all utility territories. And if you go from a gas appliance to a heat pump today, even if gas is the marginal unit of generation, you will reduce emissions. So I need to move because my housemates are coming home right now. So I'm just going to move upstairs, and hopefully the internet will stay. But I'll keep talking as I go upstairs. So that's for the water heater and the space heating side. And then the cooking, you can get rid of your gas stove. We just did that last year. My husband is a huge foodie. We got an induction stove, and he says it's the favorite appliance he has. So it's extremely precise, 0 emissions, way better in terms of indoor air quality. And also many chefs are moving towards induction and convection ovens. So this is another very advanced technology that we recommend. Okay, so we can come back to technology later if we want, but let's go on to the other benefits. I'm not going to go through this whole list in depth, but I just want to give a snapshot of other benefits besides climate. So air quality is a big thing. We obviously, over 90% of Californians live in air quality in areas that don't comply with federal air quality regulations. And gas appliances actually produce 7 times more NOx emissions than our power plants. So it's significant. And in the home, the biggest culprit of air pollution is the stove. If we didn't have gas appliances in our homes, we wouldn't need carbon monoxide alarms. We wouldn't have all these formaldehyde and NOx emissions in our house. So air quality is a big trigger and a reason to electrify. Another, obviously, is safety and resiliency. We hear of gas leaks, explosions, fires all too often, and especially in an earthquake-prone area, we need to get off of gas. Roughly 50% of all fires after earthquakes are fueled by leaking gas. So as the Earth shifts, pipes will crack, and that leads to methane leakage, and that fuels fires. Saving energy and lowering bills is key, especially for low-income folks and in environmental justice areas, really for all of us. A recent report by Synapse showed that you could reduce your energy bills by roughly $800 a year. Another report by E3 showed over 20 years you could save 10 to 20K in energy bills by electrifying. We have a lot of work to do on rate reform to make sure that everyone's going to benefit from electrification. That work is underway and will continue. But we need to make sure that folks electrify and will save money and are incentivized to use their electric equipment when renewables are on the grid. Time of use rates. And that's what brings me to renewable integration. So as we move towards 100% clean energy, we need to be soaking up those renewables when they come online, not just with batteries, but actually with how we charge and use our electricity. So heat pumps can be used for demand flexibility. You can heat your water with a heat pump water heater in the afternoon, store that water for over 24 hours, never trigger gas plant to go online. So there's a lot of fascinating demand response load shifting you can do with electrification. And then jobs. Obviously, there's going to be a big hit for pipe fitters, and we can't shy away from that. We needed to talk about that up front in our campaign and in all of our work. We commissioned a jobs report by Bettany Jones of the UC Berkeley Labor Center, and she's going to be publishing that with UCLA this fall. It shows that if we electrify by 2045, there'll be a net growth in jobs of 90,000. Obviously, that's only in some sectors. The pipe fitting side is going to see a drop, but it points to the need for managed transition and planning early, so folks will naturally retire and there won't be a significant job loss. And then the last thing I want to say is that this campaign is really key for eroding the power of the gas industry. We dug into this a bit and found that gas companies, 85% of gas industry revenue from delivering gas to end users comes from residential and commercial buildings. So as we start to electrify 5, 10, 15% of our homes, that's going to have an outsized impact on gas industry revenue. That's going to help to weaken their power, weaken their influence, and lift all of our campaigns, whether it's against gas power plants or buildings or pipelines or industry. And then we already hit on the greenhouse gas part already, so let's skip that. So this brings us to the campaign. So we have 3 primary goals. The first is to stop making the problem worse. We need to stop expanding the gas system right away. We need all electric new construction. For this goal, we're mostly focused on the Energy Commission and city and county work. The second, we only build 90,000 new units a year. So we cannot just only do new construction. We need to deal with the existing 13 million homes and buildings in California. So we need to accelerate electrification in existing buildings. There's many policy hooks and ways to do that. So we're working on that at the PUC, at the Energy Commission, hopefully at the air districts and at CARB in the future, and at the city and county level. And then last, within all this work, we want to promote a just and equitable transition. So have a priority focus on low-income residents, make sure that they do not benefit last from electrification, that they don't stay on the gas system as more affluent folks electrify. We don't want low-income people bearing the brunt of rising gas rates while others can electrify. So making sure that low-income folks can electrify first and that they see lower energy bills, improved air quality, and all the benefits that come. And also focus on quality jobs. We want to make sure that we have quality jobs when we electrify and supporting union labor. So I have 2 slides on where we work. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but I just want to say, we're working at the Energy Commission, we're working at the PUC, the Air Resources Board and the air districts. We do this work in partnership with Catherine Phillips and Lauren and Sierra Club California. And also we have a lot of great volunteers that work with us in our environmental law program. This work is mostly centered at the Energy Commission. The big focus is on new construction, Title 24. I'd love to work with more volunteer experts and members of the club on this. At the PUC, we're mostly working on low-income pilots in the San Joaquin Valley, on truing up funds through a variety of PUC programs for new rebates and incentives for electrification, and also stopping the expansion of RNG. SoCalGas is pushing renewable natural gas hard, trying to get residents locked into RNG, biomethane, synthetic gas, biomethane credits from out of state, and we need to really be bird dogging that. And then the last done a little bit of work at the California Air Resources Board with Catherine's help, and we're going to have a health report come out in January by UCLA that's looking at the air quality impacts both indoors and outdoors of gas combustion appliances and of electrification. Once this report comes out, we're going to be launching a new phase of our campaign, really trying to tighten NOx emission standards at the air district level on appliances. That's a key way to phase out gas and a key way to get to the existing buildings market and make sure that renters are not left behind, and also work on new incentive programs for reduction. So that's sort of our state agency work. It's definitely a lot. Earth Justice has also been a key partner in this, as well as NRDC. And then at the city level, we just hired a new campaign rep who I've been working with, who's terrific. So let me share a bit about our city work, and then we'll get to collaboration with chapters. So at the city level, we, in collaboration with chapters, we draft comment letters on climate action plans. So the SF Bay chapter did incredible work on the Alameda Climate Action Resiliency Plan that was just approved this past week. Very, very strong language on building electrification, among other important issues. We also comment with Earth Justice and the chapters on large downtown development plans to make sure electrification is a key part of it. One example is the Hayward Downtown Specific Plan. We also work with chapters on gas bans and local building codes. This is a picture of the council in Berkeley signing the first gas ban in the nation. And then we also work to stop the bad. So SoCal Gas and their utility front group, Californians for Balanced Energy Solutions, is traveling across Southern California, trying to get city councils to sign resolutions calling for balanced energy. Basically telling these resolutions are basically a vote against building and transportation electrification and 100% clean energy. The resolution language is incredibly vague, incredibly misleading. Over 70 cities across Southern California have already signed. Mostly they don't know what they're signing. They're doing it on consent agendas. There's no public comment period. So we're really concerned about this. We think they're going to be using this in to fight legislation or to advance their own legislation next year. So we really need to work. We'd like to work with more chapters to stop cities from signing this resolution and to sign something more positive. EJ groups and the club are actually drafting a positive resolution demanding we get off gas for cities to sign. So that's something that's starting to brew, but it's in the very early stages. So let's talk about Berkeley. Berkeley was an amazing win. This past July, Berkeley was the first city in the country to ban gas in new buildings, and it took off. After Berkeley announced this, other cities are getting extremely interested. We're getting calls from cities and activists across the state. So this is having a big impact, and we need to jump and seize this momentum and land more victories. The SF Bay chapter was critical in this success. And I must say, throughout the whole process, the Sierra Club was the most, I think, was one of the most important grassroots groups working with the city council member's office, Councilmember Harrison, to land this victory. So this is a one newspaper article that came out. You can see in this picture some of our volunteers and activists, also Melissa, who we work with in the chapter. Here's Igor, who was a fundamental leader in this process, helped us with a lot of great lobby meetings with council members. And then here's myself in the pink sweater, and then Matt Goff, our new senior campaign rep, and Melissa again at the hearing. So for this, it was great. We partnered with the chapter beginning in January. We work with the council member's office very carefully and closely, probably talking to them every week. We lobbied council members. We had fact sheets. We brought in experts together from the larger Decarb Coalition and Decarb Network in California. So we had architects and engineers and affordable housing developers show up and testify. We had academics. PG&E even came to testify in support, which was great. We did a petition. I already said sign-on letters. So letters to the council, comms work, did a ton of work to land this victory. There was zero opposition in the room. The council meeting went on till 11 p.m., over 50 people commenting in support. So it was an extremely powerful night. And it really set us up to have more cities feel confident to follow suit. So we're really excited about the Berkeley win, and it was a fabulous experience working with the chapter. We're continuing to work with the SF Bay chapter in other cities like Oakland and Alameda, and we'll see, potentially El Cerrito. There's a few others that have a good chance. So like I said, there's a wave of opportunities of cities that want to pass a gas ban or wants to do a REACH code. So we had Carlsbad in San Diego County ban gas for new water heating. Actually, we're the first city in the spring. Garcetti's Green New Deal calls for net zero buildings by 2050. We're looking forward to them introducing an ordinance this fall with exactly how they're going to implement that. We'll be engaged in that process. Like Andy said, LA County adopted an ambitious climate plan phasing out fossil fuels. We'd like to work with the county on what that means for buildings. This past week, San Luis Obispo passed a powerful ordinance to phase out gas in all new construction. It's not a ban, it's a REACH code. We can talk about the differences, but it's a pretty great piece of legislation. Menlo Park will vote next week. And, you know, there's 50 cities across the state that are looking at doing this. And it's leaving California too. So council member in Seattle just introduced a gas ban legislation. They're going to vote by the end of September. And we're hearing from activists in Massachusetts and other states that they want to do the same. So this is a whole new wave of climate activism. It's been incredible. In the beginning of the campaign, I was really concerned that it was just going to be like efficiency wonks and a very technical thing and not a movement. But we're seeing Sunrise Movement. We're seeing Extinction Rebellion, 350, Sierra Club activists and others really show up and testify at these hearings and move the council to be ambitious. So it's been a really exciting campaign, and it's really picking up steam right now. My last slide is, you know, that we're really eager to work with chapters and volunteers. Here at National, we cannot do this work and succeed without partnerships and working with chapters. So that's why I wanted to take time at my Sunday to chat with all of you, and hopefully this will inspire more chapters and more volunteer leaders and experts to reach out so we can work together. So we already have a lot of resources that we can provide, and looking for your ideas and other cities where we can win. So we have, you know, model ordinance language for a range of ordinances from pretty weak to super strong, like the gas ban. We have cost-effectiveness studies from the state for every climate zone and for every building type. We have fact sheets that touch on all the different types of benefits of electrification, and that can rebut gas industry opposition. We have sign-on letters to city council. We have a climate action plan template comment letter with Earth Justice that we can tweak for different climate action plans. We have an online city petition that's we've used for a few cities. We want to use it for more cities with your permission. And then we work with a network of NGOs, of engineers, architects, green builders, technical experts. So, you know, we're not, you know, sort of paving the road as we walk it, or whatever the saying is. We have a lot of the resources to launch a powerful campaign in your city. So we're looking for community partners, volunteers, partner groups to really work with. And if you can reach out to Matt on all the city work, I have his email there. I manage Matt. You're welcome to CC me, and I'm leading our state agency work. So that's all I got. I look forward to discussion.
Great, Rachel. Thank you so much. Just to confirm, are you?
Can I ask a question?
Are you able to stay with us, Rachel, for questions and answers?
I am.
Perfect. So I think what I need to ask you to do is unshare. Yeah, stop sharing, and we will pick up here again. And
Where are you? There you are.
Here. Here. Bear with me, please. Okay, oops. Okay, so the third part of our afternoon here before question and answers is just a quick update on the toolbox that we created as part of passing our resolution back in February. We just updated that on September 1, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Rebecca Franke, who's been my partner in this. So, Rebecca.
All right, so working with the city to get a climate resolution or climate emergency resolution passed obviously is a big deal. I mean, it takes a lot of work and it's a great accomplishment. But it's insufficient by itself. What we really need are the concrete actions that cities can follow up with to really get at zero emissions. So what Richard and I have been doing is collecting the best practices that we can find throughout California and sometimes beyond to organize within our spreadsheet and make that spreadsheet available to everyone. Because what we want to do is we want to take advantage of the innovation and the lessons learned of various California cities so that what they've done can be spread to other cities, but hopefully in a much more specific and much more rapid fashion. So what you see on the screen in front of you is the emergency, climate emergency webpage. And I'm just going to go through it quickly. The goal for 2020 obviously is to get more cities on board. The actions for 2019 that you see underneath it, hopefully Sierra Club members and activists of different sorts have been pressing cities at the local level to rapidly speed up their whole approach towards reducing emissions and increasing carbon sequestration. Now, if you scroll down, you'll see some background material there, but if we scroll down all the way to the bottom of the page, we come to what we refer to as our toolbox. And you'll notice there are 3 links there. The first link is to the resolutions that various cities and counties have passed recently. The second link there is a link to our Municipal Climate Actions spreadsheet. Now, you can look at it locally on the website, just click that link, or you can download it, whichever you prefer. And then the third link there is to our submission form. So if in your work at the local level, you encounter actions that are not in our spreadsheet, but they should be, let us know by using the submission form to get that information to us. Okay, so when you open up that spreadsheet, this is the page that you're initially going to see. So a couple of things to remark upon here. Up in that upper left-hand corner is the release date for the spreadsheet. So Richard and I, and hopefully others over time, will be continuing to contribute to the content of the spreadsheet to make it richer. You'll always be able to check out that corner to see what version of the spreadsheet you have. Then we have the overview section. I won't go into that right now. Scroll down a little bit further and you come to the heading, how to use the spreadsheet. So let's use that as a jumping in point for getting oriented on how to use the sheet. So if you go all the way to the bottom of the sheet where that oval is, those are tabs across the bottom, and they're each linked to what we call to worksheets that that are tied to climate action plans. So water and energy and waste, for example. But we've also added other categories down there. Now, if you were to click on those, you would go to these worksheets. The worksheets are organized such that every action has its own row, and each row is in turn defined by the by 12 columns. And those columns are defined on this overview page in that area, the black area there that you see in the middle that has that oval around it. All right. So if you click on buildings on that previous sheet, so going down on the bottom of the sheet there, there's a category called buildings. You can click on that to go to the buildings worksheet. You can also click to that, get there eventually by clicking on the menu that's also on that, that bottom. So if we click on buildings, Then we'll come to the menu sheet, and down the left-hand side, you'll see all the areas that we cover. Everything from community choice down to community education and activism. And alongside each one of those is an example of the typical information that is contained in each of those areas, such as buildings. Okay, so I click on buildings, and then that takes me to a whole collection of different actions. So I've just taken one action for illustrated purposes and put it on the screen. So you see the columns there, beginning with that column on the left and has the yellow tint. So that is your goal column. Okay. What is this action supposed to achieve if you implement it? So to cut down or reduce emissions from CO2 might be a goal that you have. Next to it is the version. So that's when that action was added to the spreadsheet. Third column over is description of the action and a little bit of background about it. The fourth column, and I realize these are a little bit blurry, but bear with me. Fourth column is called potency, and that's a measure of how effective, what kind of impact this action may have on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is the greatest impact and 5 is the least. So for this particular example you see on the screen, this is indeed what Rachel had mentioned, the Berkeley ordinance. So we reckoned that that was probably worth 3 value too, because obviously it is a big deal to get a gas ordinance passed in a city, but it only impacts new buildings. And then next to that is measurement. So we have a goal, but we need to be able to measure our progress in attaining that goal. Next to it, you have the area where it will be most effective. A urban, a rural area, or all regions. So we assigned all regions. Then you have a status indicator. So any action could be in various modes. It could be in a study mode, it could be in a pilot mode, in process, or in this case, adopted, because the ordinance obviously has been adopted by Berkeley. The location, Berkeley, California. The time to implement is the time to go from idea to that stage, that status that's indicated in the spreadsheet. So in this case, for the Berkeley ordinance, to take it from idea to adoption was a little bit less than a year. And then the remaining 3 columns provide additional information to a decision maker, someone who's coming from a city, trying to make a decision about whether a gas ordinance would make sense. So we provide helpful information here. So in that initial column there under links, a link to the text of the ordinance. In the next column, a variety of links, including links to the media coverage of the ordinance. And then finally, in the last column, contact information. So in this case, a council member in Berkeley who was key to driving the success, getting the measure adopted. So we like to put in here the names of the person or the people most closely connected with the action who could probably help a decision maker with any questions that he or she may have. Okay, so that's been a very quick overview of the spreadsheet and how to find your way around it. So I'll turn it back over to Richard.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. So I'm going to stay on the buildings tab and look a little bit at more detail on that tab, just to illustrate as an example of what's included on this in the spreadsheet. So the ellipse at the top actually speaks to something that Rachel mentioned, and that is that greenhouse gases our buildings, are second behind transportation in terms of sources of greenhouse gases in California. So we want to call everyone's attention to that. And then the ellipse below that focuses on something also that Rachel mentioned, which was a provision in the California Energy Code for local jurisdictions to actually implement what's called a REACH code, which allows a local jurisdiction to pass a code that requires higher levels of efficiency in their new buildings than required by the state. So we're going to go through this in a little bit more detail. Before we leave this particular slide, I just want to note that this is, if you look to the left, this REACH code on electrification is row number 4. This building tab has a total of 18 separate action items that can be implemented locally. And the spreadsheet itself, this update has a total of 74 action items. So we're only going to look at a couple here this afternoon. So I'm going to stay on the building tab and go down to row 12 to look at the REACH code example. And the ellipse at the left describes the goal of creating a REACH code. The ellipse to the right talks about the measurement that can be used to judge success. And then the text in between is the more detailed description of how to create a REACH code. Now I'm simply going to scroll to the right in the next slide. So you can see to the left, same measurement category is circled, and off to the right are the links. That's the link column. The first link that you see there is a link to the California Energy Commission, and we're going to take a quick look at that link. So I'm going to leave the spreadsheet now and go follow this link to the California Energy Commission page. This slide shows that page about halfway down the page, but it's focused on the REACH codes adopted in California for the 2016 code cycle. And what's significant here is that there are 18 REACH codes that were passed in California out of 540 separate jurisdictions, which shows what great opportunity the REACH code offers for local activists who want to deal with emissions that arise from buildings. And if you look more closely at this page, the ellipses show that this page on the Energy Commission website also provides links. Each of those ellipses takes you to a zip file, which includes all of the documents associated with this particular REACH code. And those include the submissions to the California Energy Commission, maybe a local resolution at the city to initiate an action. So this is just to drill down into this spreadsheet to focus on the resources that are available. And then I'm going to switch tabs and go, if you look at the bottom, you can see that I switched away from the building tab and I went to the community education and action tab. And I just want to mention that while many, if not most of the action items in this spreadsheet are local ordinances, there are some, as this one is, which is really all about local activism, education, and action. And this one happens to be a climate literacy action. It was the subject of a 2016 resolution that was passed by the CalConsCom, and Rebecca is co-chair of the statewide effort to spread this type of action through more local jurisdictions. So this has been a quick overview that hopefully helps illustrate how to use this spreadsheet to initiate local action and support for local action. And if you've got questions, you can feel free to contact me either by email. My email address is on the webpage, so you can reach me there, and Rebecca and I will do our best to respond. And now I want to take just a couple of minutes and go speak about the climate mobilization in Berkeley and in the San Francisco Bay Area. The work there began over a year and a half ago. Andy mentioned it briefly. There's been steady progress since then. I can't say that it's always been easy, but it's been remarkable in many ways, both as a learning experience for me personally, but also as a window into how important this issue has become for so many people in the Bay Area. Initially, the effort was run by Council Member Cheryl Davila in Berkeley and Council Member Eduardo Martinez in Richmond, excuse me. And they led the effort until August of last year, when there was a town hall that was convened in the Berkeley area, trying to enlist and broaden the support in the region. And in February of this year, the leadership expanded to include a climate emergency mobilization task force, which is really made up of representatives from 9 counties in the San Francisco Bay Area. And among other things, this task force is focused on preparing for a regional summit that'll happen later this year or early next year. And this work has also included 2 strategy meetings to engage and interact with the community. The first strategy meeting happened in July, and that was with elected officials from throughout the Bay Area. And the second strategy meeting happened just this last Friday, and it was with labor, environmental groups, community groups, basically with NGOs in the Bay Area. So my time here is too short to really go into very many of the details, but I do want to convey my conviction, much as I believe was expressed by Andy, that these mobilization efforts are important, they're growing, there's enthusiasm behind them. And to that end, my next slide is a brief summary from my perspective about what we've learned thus far. And I think the most important thing to note is that there are significant challenges in building a movement around this issue because of the potential for divisiveness. I certainly don't have all the answers, but the observations that I'll make are as follows. First, it's important to recognize that there are many community groups that have centered their work on climate. And it's also important to remember that those various groups probably, or most assuredly, have different priorities, different tactics, and different goals. And while this may sound obvious, a lesson learned and my advice going forward would be to remember this as you try to mobilize in your own community on a daily basis, practice this sort of thinking. Many groups are also working in coalitions, so you have to understand that there are many partnerships already established. Coalition work can be effective, as Rachel mentioned, but it's also time consuming and it can require a lot of zigzags on the path to where you want to go. The Sierra Club has a very in-depth focus on developing leader and volunteer skills that can help overcome long-standing inequities in our society. Learning and following the Jimenez principles for democratic organizing, which we've all heard about, can be very important. Learning to work with the intention of inclusivity is critical. Lastly, I would say that a successful movement, we need to make sure that our intent to be inclusive is combined with, or recognize that it's combined with inevitable conflict that we'll encounter. And both of these together can be used as a stimulus to find common ground. Reaching beyond our own comfort zones to express our eagerness to engage with others, not just invite them to join us, but express an eagerness to join with them, can be rewarding and can contribute to success in this important work. So I want to stop right there. Thank you for your attention.